Hello, hello. I am so glad to be here because I took a little week off. And it's funny when you take time off, you feel like, will I ever go back? But I'm here, I'm live, and I wanted to chat today about climate risks and financial impacts. This is a topic that's going to keep coming up over and over again, such an important one. And if this is something that you're interested in, drop in and say hello. And of course, tell us where you're joining from and what you do. So, really, today is going to be well, there's a lot to cover in this topic, but I'm going to keep it somewhat brief. I'm going to really kind of go through the key things that I think are important to consider. And really, all of this is centered around the TCFD, but also similar frameworks of the like. So, what's the TCFD? We need to know that first, right? So, that's the Task Force for Climate Related Financial Disclosure. And there's, of course, the Green Fund, Green Bond, there is the TNFD. There's a lot of financial frameworks out there, but it all started when really the global financial crisis hit back in 2008. And when that hit, the Financial Stability Board, which was made up of world leaders in the financial sort of departments of their governments, as well as the Reserve Bank leaders, they came together and they were like, well, we really don't want this to happen again. But the conversation around climate change became really closely intertwined with that idea that financial impacts are closely related to climate risk. And so we need to be considering them too, hand in hand, right? And so that's what I want to talk about today. I did write an ebook about this. I'm going to share the link in the comments. Feel free to take a look. It's free and it's a really easy read. It is really to cover, what are the top three risks? There are a lot of risks, of course, around climate change, but what are the top three risks? And what are the top three financial impacts? That's what I'm really going to talk about today. So the first risk really around climate change is governance. And so with climate governance becoming an even more important thing for businesses to be considering, it means it really has to come in from the top down and bottom up. So you need to have your board absolutely well aware of these risks to their governance structure and how they make decisions within a business and how it impacts day-to-day operations. So the risks come from thinking about physical as well as transitional risks. These are the risks of climate change. It's not just about the physical impacts, but also the impacts as we transition through, this carbon economy and becoming more circular and all of those things. So considering the different areas of governance that show the governance board is being climate accountable, they have that command of the subject. There's an effective board structure that is accountable as well. There's clear materiality impact assessment and integrating that into their strategic business development, that it's not just a sustainability strategy that's aside from the overall business strategy. It needs to be kind of tied all in together. And there is incentive within the board structure or within the leadership structure to be doing more about, the impacts on climate change and therefore, transparently and clearly reporting on what they're doing. So there is a lot of things for boards to be considering and around this impact in terms of, around this risk around governance. There is probably a lot more to it, but we can't cover it in detail. The book will help kind of clarify in more detail, what boards should be thinking about. So the other thing is strategic risks. So some of the recent reports have found that, failure to look at climate mitigation, failure to look at climate change and how we can mitigate it and adapt through it is the number one concern of most stakeholders for any business. And so really the near consequences of that is that we're going to see not only, of course, the climate impacts, but we're going to see how that very quickly starts to impact the business's operations, its supply chains, and its ability to interact effectively with its stakeholder groups. And so if that starts to break down, well, I mean, how is a business to survive through that? So this is why considering it early on, implementing these systems early on is really effective. Systems that address, the various climate impacts that are specific to your business operations, to the regions that you operate in, the culture that you work within, and really all of those things. So it's complicated, okay? That's to put it simply. This is a complicated piece of work, but doing it is really important, and doing it now, doing it immediately, doing it early on is really important, because it is, to cover areas of, so the strategic risk is to cover areas of technology, market, your reputation. There's a lot really that is at risk from not considering, how your business is strategically operating. And then, kind of at the very basis of all of it, when climate change, well, not when climate change, but as climate change is starting to become more prevalent in our day to day, in the way that we experience, experience nature, experience the outdoors, experience our lives, experience travel, experience everything, we are seeing more and more physical impacts. So these physical impacts, of course, one is coming from rising temperatures, but it's also coming from the fact that the climate is starting to shift. So it's not just the fact that temperatures are rising. This is why we use the kind of the misguided term that there's global warming, but it's more than that. It's actually a shift in the climate, and that is really dramatic because it disrupts the entire natural ecosystem, and as a result, it disrupts the entire commercial and financial and human ecosystem, because we have built our lives around these natural ecosystems as if they are there for our disposal. So we can do whatever we want when we want with them. But when they are no longer available to us, or they're constrained by climate change, then we start to go, oh, shit, okay, nature actually has value. And this should have been the case all along. Nature should have always had value, and natural capital should always have been recognized, because nature is not just there for our taking. It needs to be done consciously. It needs to be done with care. Look, even putting a price on it isn't really good enough, because, to be honest, we don't own it. We can't define what a tree is worth and the wood that it produces is worth. We are not that. We are not, and I'm not going to use the word important enough, but we are not honored enough to be able to define that price. But that's a bit more of a philosophical discussion. I guess the reality is that our world is built on using nature as a resource. And so how can we do it more consciously, and how can we do it more effectively with the impacts of climate change, and the risks that it has to our economy? So there are a bunch of financial impacts, as you can already tell. I've sort of touched on what they could be as we've talked through some of these risks. And so thinking about the financial impacts is really important. So one is financial systems. So banks, insurances, superannuation, they are not going to continue to finance projects and programs and businesses without there being clear understanding and action towards climate change. And that's already starting to be seen, even in Australia. I know that financiers, insurance companies are saying no more often, because they're seeing that these projects are not effectively considering the climate risks. And so if they're not effectively considering the climate risk, when the climate risk impacts the business, and the business then requires money and support of these financial institutions, then they have to keep forking out this money, and they're going to have to fork it out more and more and more as these impacts, these catastrophic events start to happen more and more. So that's one thing, is to consider the financiers and what they are going to allow or disallow based on whether your business is considering climate change. The other thing is corporate exposure. Everyone is talking about greenwashing. Greenwashing is becoming a really big issue, and that's because I guess it happens in all cycles of life that we feel like we can bypass the jurisdiction, bypass the laws. But this is not about laws. This is not about jurisdiction. This is actually about integrity. So, corporates and businesses and governments, we all need to be transparent. Individuals, communities, we all need to be transparent. So I'm not just putting this on the corporates and the governments because they're the big guys. This is up to all of us to be absolutely transparent, have integrity in the way that we do things. So if you're saying you're going to do something, then do it. Don't fluff around. Like there's no time to waste for you to say, your business is doing really well and we've got a policy in place, but then there's a dissonance between the actual action that your business is taking. Because one, you obviously will destroy your reputation, but two, there are regulatory systems in place that are starting to intensify and starting to really formulate in a complex structure that means you can, as a business, be delisted. If you're a listed company, you can be hit with fines if based on compliance. There are lots of kind of financial and legal impacts from that piece. So considering the financial impacts of the way that your business is being exposed and saying that you're going to do something and what you actually do, that's a really important thing. Aside from, of course, the fact that it's purely a piece around integrity. And, just to kind of touch base on another financial impact, it's climate litigation is one that is growing more and more. And we're actually seeing businesses being taken to court over their lack of diligence around climate change, and the individuals / groups are actually winning against these big corporates. And what's really interesting is they're making it quite a symbolic win as well in the way that they pursue the court case or the climate litigation case. So it's really fascinating to watch this space and know that, at least in some sense, there is a way that people have power, bigger power than just with their vote or just with their buying power, their money, that they actually have bigger power to take these corporates to court. But this is the thing that, we want to avoid. We want to avoid all this sort of time-wasting action where we have to manage these businesses and manage this entire process because people are not at the core of it operating with integrity. So I guess integrity has become the key word here as I've kind of talked through this. I mean, I've just been talking organically, but the word integrity really seems to be coming through here. And so it feels to me as though if we can operate with integrity, if at whatever scale that we are at, as an individual, as a community, as a business, a corporate, government, operating with integrity means that we are not only doing the right thing by ourselves, we are living and being consciously, but we're also then doing right by our people, and not just the people we love and know, but everybody, because all humans, we're all connected, we're all in this together. And so we're doing right by people. And of course, the environment, which means the animals, which means the plants, they're all important to us. Because if you look at yourself right now, the clothes you're wearing, the desk that you're sitting at, the computer that you're working on, it all came from nature. Every single thing that you can sort of see that is man-made has come from nature. It didn't just appear out of nowhere, because before all of this, it was just nature. And after all of this, it will be nature again. We are just a small part in this sort of fraction of history. So, while we are a small part, do it with integrity, live with integrity, and make sure that you're having these conversations, whatever level you're at in your business, whether you have the power to change decisions and change the way things are done, or whether you have the power to have those strong and powerful conversations despite not having the decision-making authority. That doesn't matter. You've got the power regardless. And I wish you all the best. Thank you for joining me. Those that did on LinkedIn, I appreciate you. Have a wonderful day and take care of yourselves. Bye.